looks like Jonathan's got the first cue in the Q&A, so great to have that. Thanks everybody for joining us. Our webinar is about to begin. So welcome everybody to Coronavirus Safety and Teaching Labs. This is a webinar that is a part of the BioRAFT EHS Community Connection webinar series. This is a series intended to help bring safety professionals from across many industries and backgrounds together to share information, stay up to date on best practices, just kind of try to cross-pollinate and prevent people from reinventing the wheel, and also make us all feel hopefully a little bit more connected in these times of immense stress and pressure where we have to manage a global pandemic changing everything in the way we live, and all the wonderful natural disasters that the United States and world have to throw at us, not really letting up either. So we have three fantastic panelists with us today who are donating their time to talk with everyone, but also don't forget that you all have some wonderful expertise as well. So during this webinar, there will be a live Q&A towards the end. You can ask questions at any time. If you go down to your Zoom toolbar, there's a Q&A button. Click on that and you'll be able to see the Q&A panel. And that is a great place to ask questions to us. Those questions won't be lost in the chat. Most questions in the chat tend to get buried pretty quickly. But in the Q&A panel, you can thumbs up the questions you're most interested in, so that way we can focus on answering the things that are most relevant to you. And you also don't have to wait for us to answer a particular question, because you'll be able to have some back and forth and respond to each other's questions in the Q&A. So I think that's enough background here, so we can go ahead and get started here. So if our panelists could just kind of go through, tell a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from, and then I guess whether or not right now your university is going to be having people on soon, if that's changed, and just a little bit of context. So that we can move the discussion forward from there. So Shawna, would you like to start?
Excellent, of course, thank you. Hi, I'm Shawna Lesseur from the University of Connecticut. I am a little bit of the oddball here, as well as in my department. My director is wonderful and forward-thinking, and she pulled me from academic affairs. My PhD is actually in political science. My expertise is mostly in the humanities and social sciences and how you teach about things that are really difficult to talk about. And that's how she pulled me into safety. They needed someone to be kind of the faculty plant to figure out how to speak well with faculty, work with student affairs professionals, and really be the bridge among a variety of people at the university. I've worked in every division now except for HR. So I am able to understand people's different needs and how their workflows go, and see when people are talking past each other, which I'm sure you've noticed is very common in safety discussions. People think they're talking about the same thing, but they are definitely not. And I do the instructional design here. I run our LMS and our instructional technology. So I've gotten super popular with COVID. A lot of people who didn't really have a whole lot of excitement over EHS and safety training and BioRAFT now think I'm their best friend, because they desperately need us. So it's been an adventure over here, because we are definitely starting in the semester, and it's Monday that we kick off. So we have everybody coming back to campus. We have a limited number of students and some courses online, and some courses in person, some courses hybrid. But we do have bodies on campus right now working who all need their safety training, normal and COVID.
Yeah, so I'm Jodi Ogilvie. I'm the chemical hygiene officer at the University of Minnesota, and I also have a slightly unique background. So I am a chemist by training. I went to undergrad and graduate school to do chemistry, and when I came out here to the University of Minnesota to do my postdoc is when I decided to switch careers and go into safety. And the reason that they hired me was also to be able to talk more with the faculty members and go into a lab and understand how they do things in their lab and do hazard assessments on a more kind of detailed level. And then my role recently has morphed because I am leading the University Health and Safety kind of COVID-19 response team. That is not the main team from the University of Minnesota that is responding. We have, kind of people above us who are kind of giving the main University of Minnesota directives, and then University Health and Safety, our role is to kind of help organize those and help people translate those and make sure that they're doing it in a safe way. And we serve 5 system campuses too. So I work on the main Twin Cities campus, which is one of our larger ones, and then we have campuses all across the university. We were going to start right after Labor Day. So people were going to move in soon, and they delayed move in for 2 weeks, but online classes will be going as planned. And then in some of our system campuses, we actually have students there now, and they're going to be starting classes. So we have a lot of things happening right now, and it's always changing.
Hi, Sammy Sigmann from Appalachian State University. Like our other two panelists, I actually am an embedded safety professional. And so I'm embedded in the chemistry and fermentation sciences department. We adopted fermentation sciences about a year ago. And I run this chemistry side of the stockroom. We are on our 4th day of hybrid labs, and we're not shut down yet. So unlike, how many, 4 other universities? 5, we have 16 universities in the UNC system, and I think 5 of them are already shut down. And so we're still going, so talk to me next week, that could change. But we really thought about how we were going to deliver chemistry labs because it is really hard to do them virtually. I was against kits from the start, from the get-go, and so we're doing simulations, and that seems to be going pretty well. And then so that's for the totally online sections, and then we have the hybrid sections where they're meeting also in the lab itself. And that's all I know about that. I'm also a chemical hygiene officer, so, and have been teaching 30+ years, so.
Great. Well, thank you all. Looks like a few folks have already found their way to the Q&A, so that's just fantastic. Really looking forward to the conversations that are going to come out of there. So just to kick things off, I think all of our panelists would like to speak to this question, so I'll go ahead and do just another quick round the horn, which is, has the content of material in your training labs changed dramatically to accommodate COVID? I know that in a past webinar we had on laboratory safety culture, Ralph Stewart mentioned a potential shift from, and please, I hope I'm representing this correctly, going from more experimentation focused to more hands-on experience, where it's really more about manual skills and getting the things that you just can't get in your home kitchen with pipetting and other handling and work. So what sort of things have you found might have changed in these contexts? And Sam, if you'd like to kick us off.
So as I previously mentioned, I was really against the kits from the get-go for the legal issues. And you really have to be cautious of the chemicals you're going to use if you're going to go the kit way. And even though the kit companies say they take 100% liability, there's always an out on that. So that's all I know about that. So we went with the Hayden McNeil simulations. We tried them out, they let us play with them, and they're actually quite good. Yes, it's not actually handling a beaker and a burette, but the reason I like the Hayden McNeil simulations is that you can, they actually have a waste container, and the simulation won't let the students put the dishes in the sink until they've emptied the waste, and it won't let them use a dirty dish. They have to get a clean dish off the shelf. So, you know, in some aspects, it really, as best as you can with a simulation, makes them, forces them to think about what they're doing. And it's totally managed. You can manipulate all the text. You can change the lab for them. You can put in your safety. You can do quizzes. It's Moodle based. So I like the Hayden McNeil simulations. The other thing we're doing are the hybrid sections, and where we've changed there is we have actually made them better in some respects because we're doing half the labs. We bring in one section will now occupy 2 lab spaces that are meant for 24. So we have 24 students in spread out over 2 rooms with a TA in one room and the actual instructor in the other room, switching back and forth. So each lab is manned. And we're adding more things like scientific method exercises on the off weeks for the students, GHS, and these are the intro labs. GHS, table writing, things that we never had a chance to do before, actually. So it's actually, I think they're going to get more out of it. They're doing less experiments, but I think they're going to get more scientific knowledge out of the way we're doing it. And we're very fortunate in that we have purge buttons. So I keep those purge buttons on. So I think our air changes are up around 12 air changes. Energy is out the window with this, right?
Yeah.
We've got students come in, they get somebody has addressed this question. Should I talk about it now, the face mask question, or wait?
If you'd like to, but we can also kind of get back to that later.
Okay. All right. So we've thought about that and addressed that. We, instead of checking into our lab drawers, so the question is, how has things changed? Checking into our, we did not check into the lab drawers in anticipation of having to shut down. I thought, well, if we check in and we have to shut down, then we're going to have to figure out goggles in drawers and all this stuff. So the stockroom is setting up whatever equipment they need, and the students go in and use it. They put it on the side bench. We come get it. We wash it. And so the next group gets a clean set of equipment. And so it's gone pretty good this week, and we kept the students out of the drawers. So.
Oh, congratulations. I'm sure you're getting a big round of applause. I think we all deserve that for these efforts. Definitely.
I will tell you this, and this is my, be very careful if you try to dry plastic graduated cylinder bases in an oven, because not all oven settings are the same. And even on the very lowest setting, we melted some. So yeah. That was exciting.
All right. Jodi, do you want to jump in here and tell us a little bit about how the content and material in your teaching labs may have changed with COVID?
Yeah, so I guess I want to start off really quickly by saying that in my position in university health and safety, we're kind of a consultant for everyone. And so I don't have, I have safety partners that I work with directly, but I don't necessarily we are not put in a position to work directly with every single teaching lab to kind of really know the nitty gritty of what's going on. So I kind of have a really nice average view of what everyone's doing and what everyone has been talking about, and not as detailed as Sammy has. So I'll start right there. But I know that for a lot of our instructors, kind of like what Ralph had suggested, a lot of our instructors are really focusing on their learning objectives and trying to figure out what exactly they want their takeaways to be, and even perhaps decoupling some things that would normally be coupled together, so some concepts that might normally be taught together, they might kind of separate those out and do one lab for each one. So we have some groups that are doing their pre-lab lectures and kind of set up videos and things like that in these short little video snippets, the ones who are actually going to be on campus. And then those lab sections are shortened, and there are less students per lab. So in the lab rooms, the rooms that we teach our labs in, these are kind of nicely ventilated areas. And we have kind of a 6-foot bubble, around each student that we are managing. And the students can go into these areas and the times are shortened. So they might not have a long lab time. They might have a shortened lab time so we can get more labs through. Some of our issues have been directing traffic flow for the on-campus people. So making sure that labs are kind of run in a timely manner and trying to figure out how to decrease hallway congregation. So kind of some of the outside of lab stuff. And then a lot of our groups are doing kind of this hybrid model. And some of them have actually started doing it before the pandemic, where they either use simulators like Sammy had talked about. Simulators, these groups are using something, they use Labster, I think, and they've been kind of playing with that. They've also been watching videos. Jove, I think, has some really nice videos. And so they've been kind of coupling some of the online learning experience. And then we also have some groups that do the at-home labs, but they do it with things that are in their home. So for example, some of our clinical labs do DNA extractions from fruits and things like that. So in those cases, what they do, the instructors actually have the students kind of design a lab and then kind of go through that process, and that's part of the learning process. So coming up with a hypothesis, testing it, and then talking about what went wrong, what went right, and then things like that. And so, and then of course they consult with EHS, but that's all I'll say about that for now.
And Shawna, how have you felt that kind of teaching labs have changed in their content since COVID?
I actually really love that I went after our two colleagues because I'm kind of a blend of the two. So like Jodi, the University of Connecticut is a state system that we're linked to a bunch of schools. So we have Yukon stores where I'm based, but we have a variety of regional campuses across the state, and we have a health center, and I work with all of those. And so like Jodi, I'm a little bit as an umbrella kind of helping and consulting more than Sammy getting in there and getting the hands dirty with each particular group. But like Sammy, I do a little bit of that work because I actually have my expertise in faculty development and instructional design. So people come to me for curriculum development, and for this undergraduate lab safety initiative, I work with faculty to plan how they're going to fit safety into their courses. So some of the folks that I've worked with for the past couple of years have come to me, and really we've redesigned their vision for their courses. The same way that your Center for Teaching Excellence might start thinking about that with you. So I can give you a little bit of the big and a little bit of the small. At UConn, we've definitely had some changes, but like I said, we are doing a range of modalities, and that can be really confusing for both the faculty and the students. So I'm sure it will sound confusing to you. So please don't hesitate to write a question in there if I kind of get you lost. But we have some that are fully online. Like me, I'm faculty who's blessed to only be teaching online this semester. And then there are people who are teaching labs who are using that as an opportunity to use simulations, mostly people who are really confident in technology, like some of the folks who have mentioned. But then we have people doing hybrids. So some of it's in the classroom, some of it's online. And we have people who are in the classroom and trying to find ways to either minimize the number of people who are in a space. So you can social distance, you can wear masks. When it's not safe to wear a paper mask, for example, figuring out appropriate masks that you can wear that would also be the PPE for what you're doing. And then also just rotating schedules, so that if you normally have a large number of people, the room now has lower occupancy, and we're able to fit those students in safely and have them do their work. So it's really been a one-on-one basis, and EHS isn't in charge of it. We're consultants. So the Office of the Provost is in charge of academics. Our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning is helping faculty sort this out. And we're just on a team with the faculty members and the administration to make that happen for each course. Some people are preparing for potential pivots because, life happens that way. So hopefully they don't have to do that. But it's going to be interesting. One of my favorite puzzles that we have at the University of Connecticut, even not in COVID world, is our senior designs. It's one element that I'm very proud of. I'm sure many of you have similar projects. And those ones, we really do need a lot of those students to be in person using tools that they can't have at home, because they're making really cool professional portfolio style projects before they go into the working world. And so we've spent a lot of time thinking about where people can stand. The university communications team, facilities, and EHS, along with, I'm sure, others, vetted these buttons that are now in different seats and different spaces in rooms to help people social distance or physical distance, whichever term you use. And we also planned what their rotation schedule would be so we could get people in, because these students, if they're not able to be there, I think it can be really hard for them to graduate with the project that they envisioned for themselves. And so the faculty are working really hard to make that possible for them. So it's the whole range, and it's going to be interesting to see what we're able to do. I hope we're like Sammy and we stay open and don't have to shut and don't have to have some people pivot, because there's been a lot of effort in figuring out how we can make people do this safely. And a lot of faculty are really committed to giving their students the opportunity to still do this hands-on kind of lab work when it would really change their college experience not to do it.
Absolutely.
So can I just add on that there's about 5 labs that we decided could not be done online, like instrumental. They're trying quantitative analysis is going hybrid, but instrumental said they cannot go. PChem has gone online. So there are labs that can go, but there's going to be labs that how can you do instrumental online unless you have shared access to big schools instruments where you can run data or something. So yeah.
Well, moving on to a slightly different topic. Shawna, I actually had a question for you again. So I was wondering, here we go. Sorry, everybody. I have my notes over on my computer right here. So how do you ensure that students who will be entering and working within teaching labs are properly trained? And then just with the kind of way things are going, of course, if our other panelists would like to respond after Shawna's done, you're welcome to jump in and add your thoughts and experiences.
Absolutely. And you all can ask Penny about this in the chat too, because she's one of my fabulous colleagues. We're really proud of this. We have worked with the registrar and the faculty. And 3 years ago when I took this position, I really took the reins on this project to make it so every faculty member, as part of putting in their grades, also documented safety training, similar to how my team does, and I lead for our compliance safety training. And I have created instructional resources for faculty to design their own safety training that allows them to have academic freedom and not have to lead, the whole 3 hours of whatever safety when only a section of it is relevant to the activities that their students are doing. But what we have for our employees is a safety training assessment tool where they figure out what they need to take. We had that before BioRAFT. Now it's in BioRAFT. So you're all going to be familiar with that same idea. You click the job activity and then it says what kind of training you need. We created the same thing, but in our learning management system for students, we use Blackboard. So we created a parallel one. So faculty go through, they do the training assessment like they would do if they have someone in BioRAFT in their courses, because we haven't paid for the fancy education module in BioRAFT. But then as part of their regular processes in the same place that they input grades, faculty get a roster that instead of saying student A has this grade, it says student A has fully complied with what I told them they had to do for safety training. Student B has not. So that allows the faculty and their graduate students or whoever is working with them to know who is safety trained and in compliance. And then it shows that we have all of their students in compliance before they're tackling these things. So we've really trained all of our faculty to be mini EHS trainers and given them the resources they need to pull some of our stuff that they've been trained on and just adapt it for their classrooms. I'm really proud of what our faculty have accomplished.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Jodi, Sammy, would either of you like to jump in on that one before we move on to the next question?
What was the question?
Asking,
I was reading the question and answer.
No problem. I was asking, ensuring that students will be entering and working within teaching labs that they're properly trained. So
the only thing I have, and I'm not sure exactly what properly trained means, is that like when they go back, if they're taking intro online, how are they going to go into a higher level class and know what the heck they're doing? Right. I made a video of this is why a chemistry lab is a special place. And I went through and I said, look, we have ventilation, we have hoods, we have waste kits, spill kits, we have, utilities like gas and distilled water. So I actually walked them through the lab, telling them why labs, and then the showers, the emergency response equipment, because they weren't going to get the feel for why it's not just another classroom. And so I wanted them to have the idea in their head that when they went back to an upper level class, that this is what a lab, why this is not your kitchen. And so we spend lots of money making this a safe space. That's all I have on that.
So, Jodi, the next question is coming over your way. So I know that a lot of folks here are in a position where they have a ton of safety and specialist knowledge, but aren't actually in a position to make decisions or be the ones sort of setting policies. So what do you do when EHS is not in control of safety directives?
Yes, so I think we are very similar to what Shawna had described, where a lot of our directives are coming from the provost, they're coming from our public health officer, they're coming from our health emergency response office, which are all amazing, and we're following CDC and Minnesota Department of Health guidelines too. So we wanted to kind of make it, the university is trying to make it very simple, very, kind of blanket, easy to follow. But then there are some situations where within those pieces, we might need more interpretation or more information. And so what we do, and I think what we do really well at the University of Minnesota, is we have safety service partners. So we have, within my unit, we have, we're kind of broken out into, industrial hygiene, biosafety, workplace safety, and research safety. And each of those groups kind of have safety partners that they work with. So I have 2 different colleges that I work with specifically, and other colleagues who are safety partner, who are within research safety, also have colleges that they work with. And then that way, that gives those groups the ability to reach out to someone that they know within university health and safety and ask very specific questions regarding their areas. Some of it, we're invited to. So for the College of Pharmacy, I reviewed all of their research restart plans because I was asked to weigh in on those. I have a really good relationship with that safety committee. A lot of the other colleges and departments are kind of, functioning on their own. And so what we did was we compiled a website, and we made sure that we weren't giving conflicting information. One thing that it was very clear to us in the research group that I work with is to make sure that we are not giving information that is above and beyond what the university is saying to do without data that supports it. We're kind of just supporting their mission. And so we looked at where we found that we could fit. So for industrial hygiene problems, we have an industrial hygiene work group that went around with facilities and looked at all of the spaces on campus. For lab and research safety, we've hosted town halls, kind of like Shima has been doing with some of our instructors, or some of our, soon next week I'll be doing it with some of the TAs, to kind of talk more openly about considerations for being on campus and being in person. We did this with researchers as well. And so it's really about making sure that we're taking advantage of the good relationships that we have with our groups, and sharing information because, we have spots in the university. Like a couple of weeks ago, I discovered our Center for Education Innovation, and they did some amazing forums back in May regarding online teaching labs, and they had panelists. And it was something that we weren't involved in, but a good friend of mine whose daughter goes to daycare with my daughter, hosted those. And so that's kind of how you find out that information. So it's kind of about, with EHS, we are helping to interpret the guidelines, and we're not necessarily developing them because they're coming from above us, but we're making sure that we are able to give really consistent advice and really kind of tailored advice when we're needed. So.
Great. Sammy, one last question just for you before we transition over to the Q&A portion. So a quick reminder to all of our attendees that there is a Q&A button down in your Zoom webinar toolbar. You can click on that and pop out the Q&A, and there you can ask questions that we will be able to see and answer and address. I'd recommend using that versus the chat. The Q&A helps to organize things a little bit better. You can also thumbs up the questions that you're most interested in, and you can also respond to the questions that you see that we may not be addressing. So there can be side conversations, and you can have a lot of great back and forth there. So I'd love to see plenty of those things in there. We can address those in a few minutes here. Sammy, I know that you mentioned talking about kind of shying away and generally not being a fan of kits, both from a liability standpoint, from a safety standpoint. Do you have a process for reviewing kits or for evaluating whether they're worthwhile, or are you just generally kind of off them entirely?
So there's 2 factors going on in our decision. One was with all the disruption anyways, we didn't want to have to develop a completely new course. And so what we did was we took our existing labs, have them, and then added these more scientific thinking exercises in between. So that kept us from having to develop all new kit labs, right? And then the other side is the liability issue. The lawyers would have to get involved, right, and okay the chemicals. I personally am very nervous about it. I've been involved in, and I don't know that any kit would be doing anything with fire at home, but the ones I looked at scared me. I mean, their safety, the video showed them telling the users to go into their room and lock the door so that nobody walked in on them. and while they were doing their experiment. And then they're showing using the kitchen counter, but they're not telling them about wiping it down or anything like that when they're done. And so I was not happy with that company at all, that we looked at their kits. They're very expensive, $300, $200 even, and you can design them yourself. The simulations, I think the students are paying $40 the semester for them. So they're much more reasonable cost to the student. But yeah, there was some big factors with the liability and then the changing everything. Our instructors, we did look at the learning objectives and all that. We started from the beginning, and why are we doing what we're doing? And we wanted to keep it as much the same for grading. We didn't want to add a whole lot new grading in. You know, the instructors that are doing 4 and 5 labs, we don't have TAs. We're a PUI, we're a primarily undergraduate institution. So we have all faculty teaching labs. So they didn't want whole new courses to have to deal with. Some of them are teaching 5 and 6 sections. And so they didn't want everything new. And so we tried to make a balance there. But again, it was mainly what I didn't like was the liability and of the kits. So did that answer the question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to, I really like something that you said there and wanted to reiterate that, which is looking very closely at the safety recommendations that come with a kit. I think you highlighted both having some maybe very short-sighted, not fully thought out ideas about locking the door so you're not disturbed, and also thinking about safety concerns there, but not wiping down the counters afterwards. Maybe making a list of things that, if you do for whatever reason choose to go with the kits, of safety qualities that you really definitely want, and saying, oh wait, why aren't you telling people make sure you clean up after yourselves, or why aren't you being careful about X, Y, and Z things, can maybe help to be some of those leading indicators that tell you somewhere else in this kit there will be other problems. It's not just the fact that they don't have this recommendation, it's where isn't that concern and safety baked into the rest of the kit.
I mean, it was as if, you're exactly right, Matt. It was as if when we listened to their spew that since these were, so they send you the chemicals in sealed pipette bulbs, plastic disposable transfer pipettes. And so it is 3 mils, very small amounts, but they were shipping acetic acid and nitric acid in the same kit. And there was no talk about, the interaction of these two. Oh, the waste can all go down the sink. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's a good idea. Or the student was to ask their local municipality if it could go down the sink. Now, how many students are going to go to their wastewater treatment plant and ask if they can put stuff down the sink? So I didn't like that aspect of it either.
And then just a great comment here from Daniel saying that in addition to safety issues, there are equity issues. Not every student will have access to the space needed for their labs and kits, even if they are all provided at no cost. So great comments there. Really glad to have this conversation going. And then before we move on to the live Q&A portion, I'm just gonna go ahead and launch a quick poll here. So these are the EHS Community Connection webinars. Community really being a key part of that. We rely very heavily on the feedback we get from the folks here to know what type of topics you'd like to see in the future. In addition to that, everybody is very busy right now, and it's challenging to find panelists who, like our 3 here, are really willing and able to devote their time to have these webinars happen. It's a huge help, and we'd love to have some of you who are interested. Let me know if you'd like to join, and I can reach out to you. We can talk about finding a good topic for you. And then, of course, if you know anybody in your network, these are really things that we'd love to keep going, on into the future. I don't think COVID is going away anytime soon, and as long as it's here, there's going to be a need to discuss all these new best practices. So while we can do that, it would be great to keep these going, and having your help is just a real plus there. And with that, before we move on, just a quick reminder about the Q&A button. So you can go down to your Zoom webinar control panel, click on the 2 little chat bubbles that says Q&A, and you can jump over and thumbs up the questions that you're most interested in. Those will be the ones that we primarily address and focus on. You'll be able to respond to each other's questions, so you don't need to wait for us to address things. There can be a lot of great back and forth there. And it also avoids having things be a little bit lost in the shuffle. The chat can get moved very quickly, so definitely recommend using the Q&A. Looking forward to discussions that come out of there. And to our panelists, of course, please feel free to find questions that you're particularly interested in, and just let me know, and we can go ahead and address those. So Sammy, it looks like you already have a question flagged here from Mitchell Reed. Is that correct?
I've answered a couple. Which one are you seeing? That I'd like to answer. Where is it? Well, can you read the question, Matt? Oh, I lost sound.
Turns out when I'm muted, the sound doesn't come through. Weird. I'll have to talk to
I
Zoom.
thought it was me. I always think it's me.
Nope. So Mitchell has, I've got a few questions. One, any recommended HVAC air quality standards in labs for COVID-19? And then two, what are the disinfectants that people are using?
I'm pretty sure ASRAE's got a ton of recommendations out for the actual standards with COVID in mind. In fact, I know they do. I don't know those. I'm not a CIH, but I do know that labs are already at 50 square feet per person based on fire codes, at least in our state. And so that's above, our university was recommending for classrooms 42 square feet of space in classrooms. And so our labs were already above that as far as having 24 students in a room. But we went ahead and took it to 12, so down to 100 square feet per student. 3 students use one balance, so there's very little touch points. We clean those in between. But we thought because of movement, it's not like a classroom where you're stationary. We thought because of movement, we're going to take it down to the 12. We've got tabletop hoods, which increase those are the ones that are fixed speed hoods right on top of the workbenches. We turn those on and we push our purge buttons, which I'm sure our air changes are up by around 12 air changes per hour. So like I said, energy's out the window for COVID. So our labs are probably air-wise, they're probably one of the safest spaces on campus. You think so too, Jodi? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Actually, we've been talking about being more concerned about packing people into classrooms than we are about, our research labs or even our teaching labs.
Yeah, the ventilation's already better than everywhere else. So, yep.
I would second that, but not just on ventilation, on faculty confidence in dealing with issues like this, because people who are in my primary fields, like social sciences and humanities, like writing faculty, we don't usually have to disinfect things. Nobody has that kind of training. It's not part of their normal processes. So the folks who are part of my normal undergraduate lab safety stuff, they kind of get it. So there's a space for them to jump off from. But the other folks are just really throwing for a curve because this is the first time they've had to deal with anything like this in their teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to answer something that I saw pop up from Lee, who I know from UVM. So she asked, what are you doing about buildings that are old without any ventilation? So what we have at the University of Minnesota, at least, we've had a ventilation work group consisting of industrial hygienists and some of our facilities management people go around to the different buildings on campus and kind of evaluate their status. And if we have a scenario, so in some cases we have buildings that are old and we can't do a lot in terms of making that ventilation better, or sometimes the ventilation goes down, we are only 70% offline, so 70% of our classes are online. So we are only 30% offline and in person. And then because of that, the ability to choose, for example, our lecture halls that we're going to use for specific classes that might need to be in person, or our lab areas. So we've kind of chosen the areas that kind of give us the best chance of having that ventilation. But we had a work group that assessed our older buildings.
Fantastic. And then just before we move on to the next question here, I'm going to do a quick plug for our upcoming webinars. So in addition to those topics you'd like to see, we do always try to have 3 in the bag, just so that way anybody can register. So we've got in 2 weeks, the impact of COVID-19 on risk assessments, seeing how that's changed the way that we look at risk and kind of try to anticipate that. Another one on managing an inspection program and actually conducting inspections. And then a new one talking about bathroom safety. That's a topic that I've seen come up a lot of times and is fortunately a little bit more cut and dry than most of the things we discuss. And just looking forward to having that one be a nice opportunity to share some maybe more established knowledge and set some minds at ease. So looking forward to potentially having you all on for those, and we can go ahead and get back to our Q&A. There's one here from Lori right at the top. Lori says, I would appreciate an opinion on the use of face shields in addition to face masks in the lab. In some of our labs, we cannot quite achieve 6 feet of distance between the 2 students at the table, which is around 5 feet. Face masks are already required, and I'm advocating for the use of face shields as well. They might just give that extra bit of protection in preventing a transmission. We're aware and, of course, will inform our student that regardless, they and their lab partner are considered close contacts. In other words, we can achieve exactly 6 feet. Tables are 6 feet long. I'm still advocating for the use of face shields given the time spent together in lab. What's your advice and what are other folks doing? So that question is definitely to our panelists, but also to our attendees. Feel free to go into the Q&A tab and type your own answers and share your experiences and expertise.
One of the things that we are doing, so a lot of our groups that are kind of applying to come back, so every classroom that's going to be coming back in person has to submit kind of a plan to their departments, and their departments have to sign off on it to make sure that they're comfortable with that. And so I know that, and especially they need kind of special approval if they want to go well above and beyond the recommendations of our group, or if they want to kind of not meet the recommendations. So for example, in some of the lab classes, there was concern that some students might not be far enough apart, and those PIs, those supervisors for those classes are going to have the students wear face masks and shields. But that was a decision that was put forth by that class and that department, and it was approved. The harder thing is if there is definitely a scenario where people need to work in close contact. For example, our dental students need to work in close contact with other people, with patients. And so we actually are going to be fit testing them with N95s and kind of making sure that they have an extra level of protection, where they have like a more clinical level of protection. But to do that, we need to make sure that they are medically able to do that. And so they actually need to be enrolled in our respiratory protection program. And that's what we said to anyone who's asked to kind of go above and beyond the requirements. Some people have said, well, why can't, can our TAs just wear an N95, and if it has an exhalation valve, put a cloth mask over it. And it's the advice that we say is, yes, but if it's required, you need to be enrolled in a medical respiratory protection program, because it does put strain on people's bodies that they don't realize.
Shawna, anything you'd like to weigh in on here? Is this coming across your dash?
Oh, absolutely. Jodi, it sounds like you and I have a lot of similar experiences. Anyone whose university doesn't have something similar to what Jodi was expressing, I would encourage it, because at UConn, we have a similar document for departments to be filling out. And it's something that we started with our research labs when we were allowed to start ramping up research in the state over the summer. But now we have a version that you can use for anywhere. You can use it for teaching labs, you can use it for administrative offices, but it walks you through kind of like a workplace hazard assessment, but specifically thinking about COVID as your overarching element. And that's allowing us to get these like onesie twosies, kind of understanding special needs things. For example, one reason people don't think about face shields as potentially being necessary, but might be in a teaching and learning situation, is if you have a lot of people who are multilingual learners and need to be able to see mouths. Otherwise, they may not fully be able to understand the communications that are happening. So there's a lot of variety of what kind of concerns people would have and what kind of spaces they're working in. And so that document that Jodi mentioned having, we have a similar one, and it has allowed us to do similar work in really meaningful ways.
And kind of speaking to that piece in terms of like people needing to have, their faces uncovered. So for example, if you are an interpreter, or if you have someone in class who is hard of hearing, or some of our language classes too, some of our language classes, the instructors have stressed the importance of being able to see like the vocal cords and how your mouth forms the words. And so we have some other scenarios that we've explored, the use of face masks that have a clear, piece in them some other things. We have pseudo PAPRs where like it's kind of a face shield, but with a, cotton underneath. I think the University of Wisconsin had a really nice one that they had put out, and it does the same thing as a face mask in terms of that protection, but it allows the person's face to be visible.
The music departments are the other people that are having difficulties with this. I was asked the other day, did a face shield replace goggles? And of course the answer is no. And so how do you wear goggles and face shield? Well, it's not really possible. So, and my answer was, well, and again, this was for the work we're doing here, that goggles probably indirectly vented goggles probably protect your eyes better than a shield anyways, because they're really going to keep particulates out better, I think. So I have no evidence of that, but I think that they're more, you see the medical profession on TV, they're wearing goggles oftentimes with their face mask. And ADA accommodations don't override necessarily safety of the group. We just had this question answered by our Office of Disabilities the other day, that you're required to make accommodations, but you're not required to put the group at risk. So if somebody can't wear a face mask, and here's one that I experienced, was they had autism, a mild form of autism, and so they couldn't stand anything touching them, and they would have to go to online learning or something like that because the group should be protected.
Yeah, difficult questions.
Yes, very difficult.
And actually have to be required to answer at times like this. Is a very exceptional situation. So Lori, thank you for your question. Moving on here, unless anybody had something they'd like to add before we move on to the next one. Okay, great. Next question here is from David. David wanted to know, is anyone conducting chemical risk assessments on the cleaning materials and disinfectants being used or proposed for use?
I can just quickly speak to what our occupational health and safety team is doing. I'm not part of that team, but they are reviewing everything that we're suggesting for the university. I know my colleague who manages that, her name's Val Brannigan, has invested quite a bit of time collaborating with people across the whole community, because as you know, normal disinfectants, all sorts of things that you would say that you're going to use are now running out, because we're having shortages everywhere. So all summer, this woman has been assessing the safety of a variety of things and what people need and offering suggestions. It's been a lot of heavy lifting for her.
I will add that since we are fermentation sciences, our fermentation group is actually making sanitizer using the CDC recipe with their ethanol that they're distilling. So we're actually supplying the university with some unscented ethanol for use, or sanitizer, right? And also there's a question of, we can tag it on here about what sanitizers are you using? And I will just tag this on because it took a while to get this message out to the campus. We use Vindicator, ready to use, and we've been using it for years. And you buy it in the concentrate. It's called Vindicator Plus, and you buy it in the concentrate. I can't remember what the chemicals are in it, but people in the social sciences and anywhere else other than chemistry, even the biologists were pulling the SDS for the concentrate and looking at how horrible the stuff was and getting scared because they were being asked to use it without gloves and without masks. And so turns out the ready to use loses all of its GHS hazard classification. It's so dilute by the time you use it. So it took me a while to get that message out that you weren't being exposed to a hazardous material using the Vindicator Plus wipes that are ready to use. So be careful that you have the right product, SDS, when you're looking at your cleaners, that it's not a dilute versus a concentrated product.
Yeah. especially for folks who are not maybe in SDSs all day. Navigating an SDS where you're really trying to find that exact thing can be so hard.
Yes, and so, you know, and I don't expect non-chemists, I mean, hardly chemists sometimes don't even know how to find the right SDS. So
yeah, that's why it's real important to have a good database for that, right?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to add on to that question about cleaning materials and disinfectants. We did have a webinar just a few weeks ago that was really fantastic on disinfection, talking about technologies, tactics, what is appropriate, all of those things. So there's probably some great and relevant information there. And those recordings are all available on the EHS webinar homepage if you just scroll down or click the jump link. But Jodi, go ahead.
No, one of the things I just wanted to say really quickly is we found that our researchers are obviously a little bit more comfortable with mixing their own disinfectants. So making the, you know, ethanol, isopropanol, bleach solutions they're using. And what I found was that some of my groups wanted to take those kind of same lab mixes and put them in like the student lounge area. So one of our groups was like, oh, let's just order a bottle of isopropanol and like stick it in the student lounge and they can, you know, disinfect their area. And it's like, no. So it's different doing that risk assessment to say like, okay, what is the space that you're going to be using it in? And is that type of thing appropriate? So having, you know, ordering isopropanol for a lab area and trusting the lab to dilute it versus ordering a commercially available one for like the student area. And then beyond that, our facilities group has their own chemicals and they do the concentrate, you know, dilution and stuff like that. And they're all trained on the hazards of those.
Great. All right, fantastic. And moving on here, it looks like we've got one more time for one more question before the end here. One thing, just a quick check-in with our panelists before we get to the sort of end of the webinar. Normally we do have, such as now, plenty of questions to go well past the planned end time of 4 o'clock. So we invite all of our panelists always to stick around for an extra 15 minutes to answer more questions. But of course, if you need to leave, no problem at all. Certainly happens plenty of the time and we appreciate your time here. So moving on here, just for Jonathan's question. He is interested in best practices for dissections, anatomy and physiology, sharing specimens, groups, and instruments. So do any of you have any interaction in those particular labs for dissection around A&P?
So the only thing that I know from the only thing that I know from our group. So in some of our areas, so we have both, you know, obviously human dissection, and we also have animal dissection. So we have like a vet diagnostic lab that does a lot of that. Some of our students, because of the space that they're in, they have extra ventilation because of the preservative chemicals, either formaldehyde or whatnot. Anyway, some students have been fitted for respirators in those areas depending on what they're doing. So those areas where they do those dissections are a little bit more protective in general. But in terms of some of our other groups, the anatomy groups, when we kind of closed for the spring, one of our groups had a graduate student film themselves doing a full dissection of a cadaver, and then they release those videos to the students. And so obviously that's not a hands-on scenario. It's kind of a little bit, it was like better than nothing, but they tried to make it better. They also, I think this is where they used, we're looking into, I have it written down, they were looking into software options such as the visible body. So there were some options where like, you could kind of almost peel back the layers of things. So you get a little bit more of that three-dimensional view of the body. And then on top of that, they were looking into using clay models so that students could actually kind of like build in that three-dimensional look. Again, it's not the same, you know, as being able to be there and do the dissection yourself, but they were looking into some of those different options.
All right, great. And with that, we are at 4 o'clock. So if any of you need to jump, please, by all means, feel free. But if some of you are able to stay on and keep going, we certainly have more than enough questions to get to today. So will you folks be able to stay on?
I can stay on.
Yeah, great. All right.
You can definitely stay on. Sorry, I was answering a question in the chat.
Yeah, I know things can change quickly. We've had a few times where panelists have thought they'd be able to stay on and then a meeting gets scheduled. And I mean, finding time for these things is always very challenging. Fantastic. So let's keep going here. So here's a question from Steve Wood. I'm wondering about best uses for plastic sheet barriers between students working in the lab and the pros and cons of those. Shawna, is that something that you've had any experience with or had to deal with?
So our suggestions that we've been making with plexiglass and just like plastic sheet barriers across campus, you can find those on our EHS COVID-19 page. We've been working with facilities to put things in when we could, but we've only been able to go at the highest like traffic and need spaces because it's just so darn hard to get access to those materials now. So I don't know if that's been everyone else's experience, but for us, it's been seen as, you have to do everything else, and we're hoping that this is not something you need, and when it's really, really needed, we'll put it in, but it hasn't been a first choice.
Same for us. We put a piece up on our stockroom window that's high traffic, and so, but not all offices. Originally everybody said, I want one in my office, but that didn't happen. I can't remember, I think it was on the DCHAS listserv, the Division of Chemical Health and Safety, but something came up about putting shields between shared hoods in the hood. And people pointed out pretty quickly that you're in a hood, you're in like the best place to be. What are they, like 40 air changes per hour? So you wouldn't want to disrupt the flow of the hood by putting a shield in it. And we have not put any plastic sheeting again between people, but I'm only talking chemistry. I don't know what they're doing in biology labs and there are other places that have less ventilation than chemistry.
One of the concerns that we ran into was a lot of people, we're kind of calling them like either transaction shields or sneeze guards, but a lot of in the beginning, a lot of people wanted to put these barriers up, but they weren't necessarily taking into consideration how that affects the ventilation in the space. And so how that affects the ventilation mixing and how it kind of affects just the general room ventilation. And so we actually had our industrial hygienists, again, pair with facilities to look at this. And we have, I can put a link to our website on it. It's University of Minnesota specific, obviously, but if there's a case where someone wants a transaction shield, we usually go and kind of evaluate, what they're going to be using it for and whether or not it's going to be appropriate, and if it would have an overall effect on anything. And then our facilities kind of machine shop can make something for them. I'll put the link in the chat for the University of Minnesota page, but again, it's kind of us specific.
Fantastic. And then I know there are a lot of questions here, so if there are any that either of you or any of you would like to just go ahead and highlight, you can go ahead and read that out loud and we can address those, or I can just kind of keep going through and finding more of these.
So Bruce Hart said he would be interested in seeing a blank safety plan document format that we had them complete before returning to the lab. Those documents are available on our Office of the Vice President for Research page. And then we also have a version that's for anybody that's on ehs.uconn.edu/COVID-19. But I can go ahead and put a link to that in because yes, we all have been sharing materials, stealing, readapting. So if it can be useful for you, I'm sure we stole parts of it from other people. So.
Great. Yeah, I think that this is very much the spirit of the webinars, right? Like, let's just have everybody steal all the best things they can and try and keep everybody as safe as they can right now.
Yeah, and ours was a kind of a web form. The first version of it was from the Office of the VP for Research office, because they were the ones kind of reviewing all of the sunrise plans, we called them, for research. but some of the departments and colleges actually were encouraged to make their own. And so a lot of them have different versions. So I have like a version that the College of Pharmacy made and the College of Biological Sciences made. And they're a little bit different. And some of the colleges and departments decided that they wanted to kind of go slightly above and beyond the requirements in terms of their suggestions. And so they put that in their plans too.
Great. Oh, Sam, looks like you're muted there.
The other thing that we decided early on was that I was going to have disposable masks, new disposable mask every day, every time a student walked in lab. The reason being is I didn't want to deal with the possibility of contaminated cloth masks going out, and even though it's a very low probability, it just wasn't worth it to me. So each student comes in, they get a new disposable mask, they throw it out when they're done and put their cloth or whatever other face covering they have, so they don't take chemical contamination out on their face mask. And there's not a flammability issue in our intro labs, or actually in any labs we're doing right now. So 10,000 disposable masks were ordered for this.
Great. There's actually a question here from William for you, Sammy. William was wondering, how are you running the hybrid labs? So how many students per lab? How many labs are you running for the quarter? And what safety regulations did you start in, I think, in ref to COVID? So probably in reference to COVID there.
We're running probably about 35 sections of hybrid labs in 4 rooms. This is intro. We're also running quant and biochem in a hybrid manner. But let me talk about the general ones first. General chemistry, there's 12 students in a room plus the instructor. So 13 people in a room made for 24. They meet every other week. So 1 week, our first semester intro lab runs in all 4 labs. And the second week, our second semester intro runs in all 4 labs. This avoids having to take down and set up things. Like if we tried to run 1110 and 1120 in the same week, we'd have to run in there and try to switch over equipment. So 1 week it's 1110, next week it's 1120. So they're doing half the experiments and half the students. And I don't know, what was the other question? There was another one, part of that question.
Oh, part of that question. Yeah.
Something about COVID.
Yeah, what safety and regulations did you start in reference to COVID?
I guess the face mask, right? Yeah. That I wasn't going to deal with contamination on cloth masks. We're using ethanol on all the benches we just walk through with our 70% ethanol. Since we have a good stock of ethanol, we're just walking through and squirting down all the equipment that can't be washed. So ring stands, rings, the balances we wipe with the Vindicator wipes, the hoods, the waste bottle. If it's not nitric acid, we're squirting it with ethanol, the outside of the bottle. I will tell you this, and I don't all really like to admit it, but I had to think about the plus and minuses of closing the waste container in between each student in our intro labs. And what I decided on was leaving, once students started adding their unused solutions to the waste container, to leave the lid off for the lab period, rather than having each student go in there and handle that waste bottle, because we're not requiring gloves. We're basing glove usage on the chemicals they're using, not on COVID. So we're using sanitizer and hand washing and, eliminating touch points where we can. And we have a workstation, so they're designated work areas. I hated leaving the lid off because that's like, no. But at the end of the lab, the instructor closes it. That's an adaptation.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's a serious adaptation in my mind for COVID. And it's not something I like to see because we spend all our time saying, no, you have to have the lid on the waste container.
But concessions sometimes just
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I just hope it's not developing bad habits.
Yeah. Shawna, do you have a response as well?
Oh, I was just going to say at the University of Connecticut, we are, I'm sure, as with many of you, just sticking really closely to state and federal guidelines and having our EHS members work closely with everyone on campus who's developing the wider, I guess, guidelines for everyone on the university. And what I have is a set of 2 COVID-19 training lessons that everyone on campus has to take, one of the 2 that are based on that combined knowledge, wisdom, and one is for lab specific, the other is for general. The general ones, I developed videos for things like best practices on vehicle use, how you do things that are outside of the lab to keep people safe. We have ones that are specifically targeted at custodians and modules like that. I built it in Articulate, really am housing it outside of our LMS, so outside of BioRAFT, because I need to be able to change it on a dime in case federal or state regulations change and our EHS professionals have to make changes as a result. But if you're interested, you can find our courses, because they're not housed in BioRAFT, they're out in the world, at that URL I put, ehs.uconn.edu. We have other community members in the state, so other universities and other universities in other states who have used part of it, cities using part of it. So if you're interested, you can take a look at and see how we're tackling it. Obviously, I am not the expert on all those safety pieces. I'm the expert on making it all make sense. So.
Okay, we got a great comment here from Tammy. Just saying, the contract public safety officers at our institution have been tasked with acting as health ambassadors, and fun shirts were made for them to wear to make it a friendly reminder to follow the rules, but they also have the authority to enforce non-compliance or deny entry. So I guess, have any of you 3 had to also have any sort of different approach to looking at compliance and enforcement and dealing with people who weren't willing to follow the new safety requirements when it came to, or taking them seriously when it came to actually being in a shared space?
Nope. Not yet.
We have a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of our policies are kind of, it's like peer pressure enforcement. However, with the University of Minnesota's mask mandate coming from the president, that is enforceable in terms of someone's performance review. So what has actually happened is we set up a scenario where people can submit safety concerns, and we put it right on our COVID webpage so that someone can go in. And we've actually received concerns like, oh, hey, this group was doing some work in our area and neither of them had masks on, or these facilities, people are driving around in their car and they don't have masks on, and things like that. So we'll get some of those kind of more anonymous complaints and concerns, and then what we can do is we can work through our service partners and say, okay, let's talk again with facilities like the district managers to make sure that employees are following the guidelines, or let's talk to this specific lab where there might be some concerns. And so we kind of have like that influential, we can influence them. If it becomes a real problem, supervisors have the ability to use that as like a performance problem. So if someone is continually refusing to wear a mask, or is continually refusing to social distance, or engaging in reckless behavior, they can actually be reprimanded by their supervisor, and like an official kind of complaint can go in their file.
All right, great. Were there any other questions that the 3 of you would like to address here live on the air while we still have just a few more minutes left?
Just good luck to everyone. I know how hard this is everywhere, and for people who are feeling like we are responsible for the safety of others, I'm sure everyone in this room feels the same way I'm feeling right now. We're all smiling and dying inside a little bit. Like, we're exhausted, and we don't want anyone to see us as scared, because we want to be strong for everyone else. And I know that we're all doing the best darn job we can possibly do. We're all following the rules like we always do. But everyone in this room sees you, and we know you're working your behind off on behalf of your universities or, whoever you have. We see you. We know you're struggling. We know you're putting the good face on.
And one of the things that I've learned throughout this is just you have to be patient and you have to be compassionate with people, because everyone has their own stressors. There are some people whose children are going to be doing remote learning, like kindergartners, and they don't know how to balance like having a normal job with, dealing with stuff at home. Someone might have someone they love who is at high risk or who is sick or who they can't go visit. And so you kind of never know what is happening in people's lives and what challenges they face. And so if they come off as frustrated or angry, or, you just have to kind of be compassionate and just be really open and, in saying we may not have all of the answers, we're going to work to do the best that we possibly can. And then be willing to have that dialogue with people and be willing to try to, put yourself in their shoes. It's really hard when you're exhausted and when you're frustrated and when, like, I've had people having arguments over my head, before, and it's like, I can't, be the mediator, but just kind of having that compassion and that empathy in our position is really important, especially right now.
I would really second that.
Yes.
I had someone call who was waiting in line for COVID testing, and we are not in charge of COVID testing, but they were very angry about something and they needed someone to yell at, and they yelled at me until they were done yelling. And then we ended up talking about why they were feeling all those feels. We're all humans doing this together. So just everything Jodi said, double second that for me.
Something I've learned, Matt, is that safety professionals, and I don't know that I'm a safety professional, but I work in that world, that they are really used to dealing with this kind of level of pressure all the time anyways, and not having the right answer. They have better and worse answers, but it might not be the only answer. So I tell people, now you see a little bit of my world. I mean, I deal in this kind of world every day. And so we're actually more prepared to work in this realm than other people. So they're more stressed because they're not used to having to live in the world of gray. I call it the world of gray, where there's no good, there's no perfect answer. So, and then we also do a lot of work every day that never comes to fruition. And I don't know how many of you have planned something and oops, things have changed. That's all out the door. We're going this way. And so, like, okay, well, I'm glad I did 100 hours worth of work on that project.
Just to revisit something that we did at the beginning of the webinar here, we had a fun interactive word cloud.
How does it look?
See how people were feeling, type in a few words and kind of let us know, how you're doing. And understandably, there are a lot of tired, worn out emotions here. For folks who are in the United States, there are major wildfires going. We have 2 hurricanes happening now. I know I'm sure that there are people who are still being strongly affected by the recent derecho. It is just a lot happening right now, on top of the responsibility for keeping people safe and setting policies and sometimes trying to do things without the ability to enforce them falling right on your shoulders. So this is a great opportunity to take a moment and thank yourself for the work that you're doing, and to thank each other and stock up on a little bit of extra kindness. And thank you all for joining us. This has been really wonderful. If we could have all of our attendees unmuted, I'm sure there'd be quite a bit of applause for our 3 panelists here. Thank you so much for your time. It's great having you all. And
Thanks, everybody.
In just a few weeks for our next webinar here on risk assessments. So thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thanks
Thank you
for
so much,
organizing, Matt. It's been
All right.
great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Have a safe move.
Thank you. I sure hope to.